Hello, everyone. I am Peter Freer. I am the founder and CEO of Play Attention, and I welcome you here to our presentation on Medicated but Still Struggling. And that will encompass understanding your child's school challenges. Now, as I normally do, if you would be so kind, if you are watching me on your cell phone, if you would be so kind as to turn off your messaging and your phone calls so that you can listen and participate in the webinar. If you're watching me on your computer or your laptop or your tablet, if you would stop messaging and turn off your cell phone. I think it's important that we don't have it tied to our hands so that we are not as distracted. Being distracted during a conversation with anyone tends to make you learn less, cause you to learn less. And it also, by the way, it interferes with your relationships as well. So if we could do this just like a fireside chat where it's a discussion and I will take your questions and try to answer them for you as we move forward, I'd be delighted to do that. So I hope you'll join me in doing that. The topics that we'll cover today are achievement versus performance. And I want you to understand the difference between the two because achievement is much different than performance daily in school. And we need to understand how that is related to medication. We also want to understand the ADHD characteristics that our children may have or we have personally, and how that affects school performance. Understanding medication, its history, what it is, how it affects us and our chemistry, how medication affects our learning outcomes, and what's missing. Why is it that you're here? Why is it that your child or you or your client is taking medication and still not getting everything they need, not being able to perform as one would expect? And what can you do to help? That's what we'll cover today. So let's first approach ADHD characteristics in school performance. Let's talk about this in depth a little bit because this is actually at the core of the problem today in education. It typically starts with a note or a call from school, or maybe even an email from a school saying, and the teacher says things like, he's really lazy, or she's forgetful or unmotivated. And he's oppositional when I confront him about it. And this could be about a kindergartner, could be a first grader. And you hear these things and you're rather astonished at first, but then you have to dig into it. And why is this happening? I don't see it too much at home. Seems okay. And yet the school's complaining. Maybe you did see a little bit of it at home. One of the things I want to make certain you understand is how much education has changed since perhaps you were in school. Do you remember in kindergarten, when you went to kindergarten? For many of us here today, kindergarten consisted of half a day and a nap and a snack, and we went home. I was in that type of kindergarten. Today, it's a full day because of socioeconomic pressures. Mom and dad both have to work all day, full-time jobs. So school is there, especially at kindergarten. It's a full day. Now, also the curriculum has been pushed down. So when I was in kindergarten, they expected me to know my colors, to be able to recite colors and understand what color was which, recite my ABCs, and maybe I could write my name. Maybe a few other things. They allowed us to do those, explore those options, play, where we learned a lot about playing with others. We learned how to socialize. We learned how to make friends. We learned how to negotiate. And all of that has been stripped away. So Even, in kindergarten, I was required to learn things called sight words, words that I could instantly recognize. Words like to, to, words like me, him, run. But now, students, even kindergarten students, are required to be able to write full sentences and draw pictures and write a story and put it all together, maybe even form a little book. That's what's required in kindergarten now. I remember what I was getting in seventh grade, maybe eighth grade algebra. I see kids getting in sixth grade now. So it's all been pushed backward, basically thinking that more is better and more earlier is better. It may not necessarily be so. I would say in some cases it's absolutely not. Letting children be children is a very, very important stage, and we have less of a childhood now than we've ever had before in history. So then we kind of get a context from where all of this is coming from. We also have a problem with the fact that our school's categorization of our child fundamentally sets a trajectory. And this is how it typically starts. And I want to go into this in detail so you understand how this essentially works. You have a complaint from the teacher, and then there's an arrow. So the next step is you see a pediatrician. And then there's another arrow. It says 15 minutes after seeing a pediatrician, you have a prescription. There's another arrow. Your teacher cites behavioral improvement. And so then there's another arrow. But there's behavioral improvement, but I don't see him doing any better at schoolwork. It's a struggle. And he tends to hate school. Then you go back, there's another arrow. And the pediatrician increases the dosage. How many people here, just a show of hands, have undergone this this particular scenario? If you have, raise your hand so that you see how it develops. The school sets a trajectory. Wow, perfect. That's a lot of us here. It's the majority of us here. Thank you. Does anyone here understand who is responsible for these arrows? Who is represented by these arrows? Can anyone say who is responsible? The arrows represent you, the parent, right? The teacher complains. First arrow is you drive them to a pediatrician as the messenger, right? You're telling the pediatrician what the school sees. You see the pediatrician. There's the arrow back down, says you go to a pharmacy, and because I have a prescription, start giving to my child. Then I send him back to school, another arrow. The teacher cites, well, he's behaving a little bit better. He can pay attention a little bit more in class. Then there's another arrow. That's you saying that schoolwork is still a struggle. Then I take him back to see the pediatrician. So there is a big divide. You see the term structural divide? And I'm sorry about my picture covering up part of this last slide. It's just the way it was formed, right? The structural divide, and this is from a book called The Last Normal Child. If you want to get it, I think you could get it for $10 on Amazon at this point. But it is very, very good. You can get a used copy. Brand new copy is very expensive, but used copy is very good. The Last Normal Child from Lawrence Diller. He's an MD. So you can get that on Amazon, and you should read it. It'll give you a lot of understanding about why things are such a quagmire. That's the word I want to use, a quagmire. It is something that you slide into that you don't expect many times as a parent, and yet here you are, and you're facing all of this. And then here's the structural divide. This is quite interesting, and Diller makes note of it. Most of us don't note it, but Diller makes note of it. Diller says that the teacher complains, then you are the messenger to carry that to a pediatrician, where not everything can be relayed that you want to be relayed or that the teacher wanted to be relayed, because you are now the middle person. Then after the pediatrician may tell you certain things that need to be done. You say, well, I'll give them a prescription, but you probably should do this at home and do this with the teacher. And then you're supposed to relay that all the way back to the school. Now, the school will decide what they're going to do, regardless of what you say. You're the middle person. And so then you wonder why things do not happen the way that you want them to happen, or progress the way that you want them or intended them to progress. And then the cycle repeats. Does this seem familiar to anyone here? Does this raise your hand if it seems like you understand, and you understand how you all of a sudden have become the middle person in something you knew very little about, and yet you are supposed to be your child's greatest advocate? It's kind of a crazy situation, but this is the reality of it, isn't it? This is what we see as parents, and this is part of the issue about why we have such a struggle. So even though I get medicated, medication oftentimes does not have a huge impact on impulse control, maybe a little bit. And that means your child may still have a hard time taking turns, rushes through his work, and has trouble making friends because he's so impulsive. They're kind of repulsed by being around him for fear that they may get shoved, or something may be impulsive. He may impulsively reach out and pinch them or sock them or something. He may still have emotional overreaction, dealing with criticisms or mistakes. I hope this resonates with you, because this is what you commonly see even after they're medicated. Flexible thinking. They have difficulties with transitioning from any task that they're familiar with to something new. Can be rather troubling, could cause a fight between you and your child. You may see this at the grocery store. You may get it during homework. Working memory may be affected, can't remember instructions, difficulties with comprehension and problem solving. This sometimes can be assisted by medication, but many times you don't see a huge leap in progress here. The ability to self-check, right? To be able to monitor myself. I look over my homework, but that doesn't really improve a lot. Doesn't understand how other behavior affects other people, because they can't self-monitor. Planning and prioritizing. They don't know what parts of a project are important. They don't know how to plan in this project. So these are all necessary for doing well at school. It affects achievement and performance. And when we give them medication, many times as parents, we think all that's going to be fixed. And the reality is, many times it is not fixed. But we expected it to be. Everyone said medication will fix this. And many times it's not. So we need to find out why that's actually occurring. I want to talk about achievement and performance, because they're oftentimes talked about at school. When you talk to the teachers, you're talking to administrators. They're saying, well, their achievement isn't where we'd expect it to be. Performance is a little bit better in the classroom. And you're like, internally, you're wondering what the heck they're talking about. And so let's find out what is actually meant. And I'm sorry, this slide, next slide or two, is a bit wordy, but I'll simplify it for you. There is an achievement. We're looking at a long-term understanding of what their academic success is, right? Not only academic success, but personal growth, mastery of the learning of various subjects and objectives that were set by the teacher, skill development. And so it's a comprehensive view of their capabilities. Now, at the end of the year, they take a standardized test, an achievement test, to see how much they've progressed from the end of last year to the end of this year. That's achievement. It's very broad, and it is essentially um, the hallmark of that is that it is long term. Performance, on the other hand, refers to very specific tasks. Let's say we're learning multiplication tables at school. How can I perform on a test of my multiplication tables? Now, my performance may be measured by the answers I get correct. If I got 9 out of 10, I get a 90%. So performance is very short-term based. Achievement means a long-term look at how I'm functioning. So when you're looking at these things and you're on medication, typically performance will get a little bit better. But achievement doesn't go very far at all, doesn't improve much at all. So we need to understand why. Why is performance a little bit better, but achievement doesn't really improve? And this seems to be the case. Now, the research on this, on outcomes, long-term outcomes, is slim. There have been several studies, and I'll cite what they have found because the information is good. But the reason that we don't see long-term studies is because of the vast expense it takes and the time it takes to be able to perform these studies. So we don't have many long-term studies. The few that we do have give us an insight into what's happening. So again, this is kind of a summary slide between performance and achievement. Performance focuses on specific tasks, short-term tasks and assignments, right? Assessments that I get for learning a specific skill set, subject area, what my score is on a history test, what my score is on a math test. That's my performance. Achievement encompasses broad, it's much broader, overall progress and accomplishments over a long period of time. The two are quite distinct and quite separate when we're taking medication. So let's, I think some of you here who don't know the history of medication will get a real, have an epiphany when you see this, because it is quite interesting when we actually see what's going on. So just understanding what it is and how it works. So Ritalin, which was probably the foremost ADHD medication, still used today, was developed in 1944 by a Swiss chemist, Leandro Nizan. And he synthesized methylphenidate. And a lot of what you get today are derivatives of methylphenidate. And Ritalin itself is still in the market. He was working for a Swiss firm called Ciba-Geigy. Ciba-Geigy is now Novartis. Many of you probably have seen the Novartis name. They advertise quite a bit. He tested the drug on himself and his wife, Marguerite. She was nicknamed Rita. He called her Rita. Rita loved playing tennis, and he saw that the drug improved her performance on the court. And he also found that Rita was a little chubby, and it slimmed her down just a little bit. So he decided to name the drug Ritalin, after his wife, Rita. Ritalin. So this is a bottle of it. Started in about the early 40s, and this is the bottle here is from 1954, and what they used up to about 1970. So you can see it's been around a long time. But the next slide is enlightening. So in 55, the US FDA licensed the drug, Ritalin in this case, for medical use, but it wasn't until the 90s that its use really took off. So here's what it was used for: narcolepsy, depression, brain injuries, all right, because we had cognitive regression during stroke and trauma, cancer, and HIV. Both in cancer and HIV, the treatments often cause brain fog, cognitive loss, and so they felt that giving them Ritalin would help clear that up a little bit. In 2011, we had about 7% of US children were taking ADHD medications. And by 2016, 19 tons of methylphenidate, Ritalin pills, were taken in the United States. That's a lot of medication. And this, again, this next paragraph is by Dr. Diller. And again, I'm sorry that my head is moving through some of these, but we are recording this, so hopefully you'll be able to listen to it again if you can't read anything here. But we had the self-esteem movement that happened in the 80s, but that actually started as early as in the 1950s, where psychologists were examining Freud's statements regarding self-esteem. And they interpreted Freud's theories as saying that if we reduce stress for the child, make the child stress-free, then they would be neurosis-free. They wouldn't have mental issues. And so we started heading down a pathway in the 1950s, believe it or not. I think the reality of that trend actually peaked in the 1990s when we became very worried about self-esteem, very worried about self-esteem. And what this means is that we became a bit intolerant of children who behave slightly differently, who processed a little bit differently. So instead of letting them just be someone who's a little bit different, we put a label on them. We started identifying them as having mental illnesses. And indeed, ADHD is a type of mental illness of sorts. It's registered and you take medicine for it because it is in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the current one, and has been for quite a while. So we have a history of the way that we have looked and evolved in education about how self-esteem helps or hurts the child. Everyone's got to have this perfect self-image, otherwise, you're going to have all kinds of difficulties. Now we know that children have very, very good self-images, unrealistic self-images, and they still have a variety, a plethora of medical, psychological problems, anxiety being one of them. We have never experienced higher rates of anxiety in our society than we are experiencing now. We have never seen the rates of suicide in children that we're seeing now. So Freud's thought, of course, that was misinterpreted. That's not exactly what Freud said. That was just one of those extremes we went to and said, if you have no stress, then you'll be neurosis free. That's not true. And today, the generation today, if you give them stress, they can't take it. They can't take stress very well. We have sheltered them so much that if we produce stress, they want to run to a safe zone. Even if it's happening in classrooms. Universities experience this all the time. I remember Stanford just last year, the students wrote to the university administration saying that if we are getting in a history class, if something is going to happen during that class, if the history professor is going to tell us about how Native Americans were overtaken by the Europeans coming in, we want a notification. We want an alert, right? So that they could be sheltered. They would know something's coming and maybe they should get up and walk outside. So this is a strange time that we're in because we've created this. The whole of society has created this. And it also affects the way that we look at how we cope with it. We throw meds on it. We say it's a mental illness. So how does medication, ADHD medication, work for ADHD? The answer is we don't really know. We have a good idea, but we don't know. I think the promise of having some kind of biological model rather soothes us to think, okay, it is a brain problem. This is targeting that brain problem and it's fixing it. I think that's what we all assume when we get it. The problem is that's not happening. That's not really happening at all. And this slide is very, very important for you to listen to. We don't really know. We do know they do target dopamine and norepinephrine. These are chemicals that really help you control your attention, your focus. So the second point here is that in theory, stimulant medications for ADHD try to increase the activity of the neurotransmitters. And by triggering their increased release, especially in the frontal lobes up here, where your executive function is basically formed or basically managed in your frontal lobes. It improves our ability to focus on boring tasks and difficult tasks. So that's one of the key phrases here. Taking medication increases our ability to focus on boring tasks and difficult tasks. And we used to say, oh, it calms children down too. It has no such effect of calming them down. They may calm down because they are able to focus on boring things that drove them crazy. They would want to run around the room, play, do something else. I'm not doing that, it's boring. And they'll go off and do something else. And if the rest of the room is calm and they're on that task, especially in a classroom, this child wants to run off and play or do something else because they're bored. They obviously are not calming down. They're just, now that they take medication, they're able to focus on boring tasks. Now, this is not isolated just to ADHD students. This actually happens among neurotypicals who take ADHD medication and ADHD children. I'm going to say that again. Our ability taking Ritalin or ADHD medication has the same effect on a neurotypical. Let's say I'm neurotypical and I have a friend who's ADHD. I take it, he or she takes it, and we are both able to focus on boring tasks and difficult tasks. Both of our abilities are improved. It works the same for everyone. So many times you'll go to see a pediatrician and you have a short time because medicine here in the United States typically is industrialized. You are on a conveyor belt. Once you hit that, you hit your doctor's office, you sign the paperwork, you say, I'm here, ready to see him. They'll call you when it's time. You wait in a room. He'll roll around to get to your room. You get to your room. He gives you 5 minutes, 10 minutes to listen to your problems. And he has other patients because this is a cycle that medicine takes now, because it's about making numbers. How many people can I treat in a day? How much money does that make? And most of private doctors are not private any longer. They've all been bought up by larger medical institutions that run them now. So many times when you see that pediatrician, they'll go, oh, yeah, it sounds just like ADHD. Why don't we give him some Ritalin or some medication and see if he's doing better? And if it is, then we know we've hit it. It's ADHD. Anyone here experienced that at all? Hand up if you have. You go in, they say that, they say, okay, let's give them this, and if it works, yeah, that's quite a few of us. And if it works, you're That's it. We're done. The problem is, as you now know, it's going to help them focus on more boring things. But even if they're not ADHD, it's going to help them improve their focus on boring tasks, mundane tasks, schoolwork. So was it really ADHD? Was it a reading problem? Was it a visual problem? He needs glasses. Was it an auditory processing problem? We don't know. Was it an executive function problem? More likely, very likely. Are you following? Does it make sense? I really want you to be able to follow where we're going with this. So if there are questions, please let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them by the end of the session. How does that affect learning? How does it affect achievement? And how does that affect performance? So the reality is that medication is like putting a Band-Aid on a scrape. It will mask the symptoms. I don't see the scrape anymore. It's masked. But here's how it happens when you look at it on test scores. Test scores worked out, if you're on it, you got about 2 points higher in math on some of this research and about 5.4 points higher in reading. So if your scores are only 2.9 points higher and 5.4 points higher in reading, you would say, really? That's all it does? How many people have experienced that? That the child seems better able to focus, yet our academic scores have not been incredibly good, and they're having trouble still at school coping and trying to get through school. Can I get a hand raised on that? Thank you. Yeah, this is quite common because while it does help us focus more on mundane tasks, as we saw earlier, there are more things that are involved than just being able to focus, right? So focus becomes the tip of a very large iceberg, right? Focus is at the tip, but down below it, I have impulse control. All of those things that I talked about previously, planning and organization, self-checking. Does medicine improve that? Not really. So more achievement tests. Now, these next two bullet points are incredibly important. More achievement tests and academic performance outcomes improved with multimodal treatment. All right, so multimodal, what does that mean? Multimodal. Well, medicine is not multimodal. Medicine is just one intervention, a single intervention. Multimodal means we use many different techniques to help. That means behavioral interventions, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, executive function training, medicine, they all have their place, but not single, it just doesn't seem to have a significant effect if we're taking medicine and then expect school outcomes to be better. Pharmacological, you can see multimodal compared to pharmacological in that second bullet point. So improved only 75% and 33%, respectively, between performance-based achievement and performance-based. So an achievement test with multimodal approach, where you're teaching executive functions and working to help them get those, 100% and 67% respectively, then only 75%, and that's a high number. I never expected to see even 75% with simple pharmacological intervention, and 33%. When you give them nothing, non-pharmacological, and you give them nothing, you get essentially the same thing as you got with pharmacological. You see that in that second bullet point? Now, these are statistics from studies that have been done on multimodal treatment and just pharmacological. So non-pharmacological is about the same if not better, than pharmacological. And this is not me saying it. These are tests that you can pull up, and we can give you reference to that have been reported to the National Institutes of Health, and they're rather good, but there's still scant. Remember, there's not a lot of test data on this simply because it would take a long period of time and a lot of money. Here's the conclusion that's highlighted. ADHD adversely affects long-term academic outcomes. And obviously, you already know that. And that's why you're here. And multimodal interventions are far more effective. And this is from the National Institutes of Health. How does medicine affect learning? Why isn't it helping? These two are from Dr. David Rabner, who is a psychologist out of Duke University, I believe. And he puts out a good newsletter. And David has reviewed these studies. And this is what he notes. Should be also noted that the treatment generally does not normalize academic outcomes in ADHD youth. Thus, while treated youth may generally be doing better than they would have without treatment, treatment often does not bring them up to the level of their peers. This is what he ascertained after reading those studies and doing a full review himself. So this is why you're experiencing what you're experiencing when you say, well, I thought medicine was going to take care of all of this. It does not. So then the question leads us to, what is missing? What did I miss? Because if you remember, we go back to the very first slide where you fell into this funnel as a parent, and you listened to the teacher, went to the pediatrician, took back some information to the teacher, got information back, went back to the pediatrician, this whole cycle that you went through. Things were missing. Things that they thought were going to happen that did not happen. And this is what we need to understand. What the heck is missing? So I'm going to go back here to when I do the next slide, and this is executive function as your brain's conductor. Remember when I was talking about planning, organization, self-checking? This is all controlled in the brain by executive function. It is your brain's conductor. They tap the baton, and the brain starts firing in synchrony. I am able to now pay attention. I'm able to plan, organize, self-check, control my impulsivity, control my emotions. This is all termed executive function. But we note when we take medicine, this still generally is not something we're seeing really improve, because medicine cannot teach you anything. And executive function is actually learned. None of us are born with extraordinarily good executive function. We all have the capacity to have good executive function, but we are not born with it. Then how does it come about? How is it that we learn good executive function? Because all of these things that we talked about previously, the set of mental processes that allow us to work well at school, if they are weak, and they are weak in 90% of the children that have ADHD, then we can see now, here's the missing link. That's what we're talking about. What's missing? Why is it that I can give medication and I still get poor academic outcome? And it may not be just academic outcomes that are not what you expect or what you expected to improve, but got lesser of. And it may be, let's say, relationships. How many people here note that even on medication, your child has difficulty with social environments and relationships? Show of hands. Okay, again, majority of us. Thank you. All right. So how many people here find that their behavior regulation improved a little bit, but really not what you expected, not what you expected to normalize to? How many people here, show of hands? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's again the majority of us here. How many people here? Academic performance, achievement, and performance. Not what you expected. Right. Thank you. So the reason is that medication, again, medication cannot possibly teach these skills. Now, it may make them a little bit better because I can focus on mundane tasks, boring tasks. And remember, that is true for me as a neurotypical or for my child or my friend who is ADHD. You know, it works for us the same way. As a matter of fact, it works so well that many, and you probably have heard this, that many university students actually will share it with their friends or sell it to their friends. How many people here have heard about that? That my friends at university, I've heard this, that it's sold and it is abused at university. Because if another student needs to study for a test and it works for them the same way as a neurotypical as it does for an ADHD person, they can use it to study for a test overnight and do very well. All right. So this is something that is a reality of that medication. And the medication is a Schedule III substance. I think it is in the same field as cocaine and methamphetamines, meth, as we call it in the street. So that is often abused at university campuses as well, because if it is used and if it is abused, it can cause the same or nearly the same state of euphoria that is induced by cocaine, because it's in the same class. So this is what's missing. So most notably, medication doesn't teach executive function skills. It may improve weak executive function, but does not teach the skills they are deficit or entirely lacking, that are deficit or entirely lacking. And this presents a huge gap between those skills necessary to be successful in life. So, and notice here I've written in the haves and the have-nots. The haves are the people that have learned and can learn as executive functions, and those who have not learned executive function. Now, you don't have to be among the haves or the have-nots, especially the have-nots. This executive function can be improved. It can be trained. And that's the whole reason I started Play Attention 30 years ago. So what can you do? Steps so that you can foster strong executive function. It begins at home. If you notice that they have weak executive functions and you don't know where they are, you can actually take a test, and I'll show you, talk to you about that in a moment. We have a test you can take online with us. It's free, and it will show you where your executive functions are strong or what areas you need to work with. And you can even do an assessment regarding that as well. But it starts at home where you pay attention to it. You go, ooh, they're not good at emotional regulation. I need to help them balance that out. And you can. It's not something you're ever taught in parenting school. We don't have a parenting school. We have to work our way through it, but you can teach it. And it starts with your good relationships at home and showing them that you're balanced. Remember, the first point at which a child learns is looking at mom and dad. positive relationships from family members in the community, right? To support their efforts. And you have to support their efforts not by telling them they're a genius, not by giving them a gold medal for just showing up. You have to take specific measures to support their efforts. Something like if they cleaned up after themselves, you don't go, hey, that's a gold star for doing that. You simply say, I really appreciate the fact that you're helping out. That's not a gold medal. It's something that's coming from your heart and saying, I really appreciate your help. Model skills that you want them to have. Maybe somebody rear-ended you in the car, they're with you. You don't start crying, or you don't get out and start yelling or, waving your fist at the other person. You may remain relaxed and calm. And you're demonstrating it. You're modeling the skills to them. All right. You can engage them in activities that allow them to practice these skills. You can role model with them, role play. Say, hey, what happened? You be me when I got hit in the car. What did I do? How did I act? They can role play for you. I know it seems simple, but it works. It's the way they learn. Remember, their first point of learning is always watching you and whoever's around them at home. That's where they learn. That's the first step. This guides them to where they can become independent. And we'll talk about limiting and each one of these, limiting environmental stressors and all. So when you practice, remember I said use effective praise. You don't tell them they're brilliant when it's not brilliant, right? If they solved the Schrodinger wave equation, well, that's brilliant. But if they drew something really nice, I like that. Let's put it on the fridge. Not, you're a genius. I am so proud of you doing. That's good. Let's put it on the fridge. I like the detail you have right here. Something like that shows that you're actually looking at it, making sense of it. But it's got to be effective praise, not nonsensical praise. Discuss how their effort allowed them to succeed or complete the task. I really like the way that you stayed with it. Your room was pretty messy, but you really stayed with it. You really it came out so nicely. It's so clean. Does that make you feel better when you have an organized, clean room? So you can say, how did that make you feel when you had all of that organized? And they'll say, oh, yeah, I feel better now that it's clean. It's easier to get around my room. It was a mess. But just that discussion opens up that door for you. And then allow them time to discuss their peers, with their peers, on their thoughts on effective study habits. So this is very good when you've got them and they're with friends, or they're maybe with the rest of the family at the dinner table, and you say, well, you know what? This was the first time that I didn't have to stand over you when you were doing homework, and you really did a good job at that. How did you do that this time? And they go, oh, what I did is I knew that I had to have this done. So I just laid those other books over here, and I got this done because it was the smallest one. And I started there. It was my smallest assignment, shortest one. So I started there. And that really helped me get everything finished, because once I did that, I could get the bigger stuff. So they're showing you and really stating for you how they organized it, how they planned it, what their structure was, and how they're thinking. And you can reinforce that. So these are all ways to teach it at home. You look for these teachable moments. You set them up. You create an environment for them. So you can model these skills as a parent. Do your work alongside their work. If you have work that involves, let's say they're doing their homework, and you have some work that needs to be done on the laptop, you sit right beside them while they're doing their homework, and you do your work. You're modeling that you can sit there, be quiet, and get your work done. Use a calendar with reminders for them. Teach them how to use a calendar. It can be posted on the fridge. Here's what I expect you to have done today. This is your calendar. Remember to come back in here and view it every morning. You want to be on time as often as possible, because if you're not on time, they're not going to be on time. Remember, they learn from you. Be prompt. avoid procrastination. Now, this is hard for parents, but if you're avoiding procrastination, you're teaching them to avoid procrastination. For example, you have a meeting at the end of the week, and it's a very important meeting, and you have to prep for it. And you're prepping one afternoon or one evening, and they're around you, and they say, "What are you doing?" "I have a meeting on Friday, and I'm getting ready for it today." "How long's Friday from now?" They say, "Well, it's 4 days from now." You see how much time I'm taking to get ready for this project? So you can actually teach this. Is that making sense? You model it. Talk about how you resolved a particular issue. At the dinner table, it's good chat. "Oh, Bill came to me today and he said this was going to be a problem if we were going to continue on this path. And so we discussed other paths to take so that we could get this project done and not have any arguments about it. And we came up with these ideas." And you talk about how you generated the ideas. Again, another way that you can, model this. And then, of course, you accept failure graciously. You don't scream and cry. "I played a tennis match today. Dad, where were you? I played a tennis match today. And I played with Jim. And Jim really worked me over. I did not play very well, but I'll do better next time." I accept failure graciously. We all want to be winners. Sometimes we're not, and we don't cry about it. We just go, "I'll do better next time." Engage them in activities that allow them to practice skills. And you can do this with simple board games that involve strategy. You can find many of those still. Cooking together, is a great way to teach them to practice these types of skills. Cooking together, measurement, planning, organization, making certain you have all of your food items lined up for the recipe, reading a recipe. It's just such a good way to do it. And you get to have a blast in the kitchen together. You could have talent night, all right, where they can practice certain skills that they have. Maybe, and a lot of the children I taught would be tremendous comedians because they had the sharpest, quickest wit. And maybe they want to do on talent night. Maybe they want to do some comedy for you. Maybe they're a singer. Maybe they want to show you they're good at science and they want to show you a science or a magic trick. You never know. Music could be a way to do it. Learn magic tricks. Like I said, sports, yoga, taekwondo. These are good ways for them to practice these skills and to learn them. So to guide them toward being independent, you want to inspire them to be motivated. And there's nothing that inspires kids to be motivated than curiosity. We make them curious about why things happen, solving mysteries, just like a detective. And in this case, in this picture, they're using some beakers to make some secret ink or something like that. But when we're doing it, it's the best way to teach them this is how you become independent. You have these skills and you're able to do this on your own. And that helps them to learn to self-assess if what the outcome of this independence practice is actually teaches them to self-assess. How well did I do? And how much is this helping this project proceed? Now, limiting environmental stressors is also very good because if the child is stressed, then they learn less. And they also have more trouble with relationships because they're anxious. So, and I am a huge advocate of this, and I know the genie's out of the box, but to be honest with you, reducing screen time is one of the easiest ways to decrease stressors. Do you realize that your child is on screen? Typically, the average teenager's on screen 8 to 10 hours a day, if not more. And if your child is younger than that, they're still on screen for a long, long time. And the American Academy of Pediatricians has recommended prior to the age of 6, I think they recommend, or it's probably the age of 3, it's 0 hours of screen time. After 3 to 6, they're recommending an hour a day, but it's quality screen time, something educational, a nature show, something that they'll learn from. Reducing screen time actually helps increase attention as well. We have some of the lowest attention spans in our history right now in this country. This second statement is incredibly true and salient. The brain is nourished by what we feed it. Be careful what you feed it. If you're feeding it junk, it will perform for you the same as you feed it. If the child is consuming visual and auditory information, it should be high quality and low stress and violence. And this is incredibly important. One of the best, for young children, one of the best examples of this was Fred Rogers. Anyone here remember Mr. Rogers? Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? There are a few of us that do. Mr. Rogers had a very, very slow-paced, friend-driven TV show where he actually he presented problems that kids normally wouldn't be able to discuss. He presented problems like divorce, even racial differences. There was a time of unrest in the United States when his show was on where Black people were ejected from a pool from a hotel because he didn't want Black people swimming in his hotel pool. He threw Clorox or chlorine on them and they got out. So in a show, Mr. Rogers actually had a mailman that came by, and the mailman was African American. And he said, "Hey, it's a hot day. I've got my feet in the kiddie pool here. Would you like to join me?" So he was a magician, just a genius at creating environments where we could address things without violence, but they were necessary to address. And it's a very calm way of doing it. And I would advocate we do that still. It was brilliant. And you can still see those shows on PBS, I think, or you could probably find them just about anywhere at this point. Low stress and low violence. By the way, this is the reason I developed Play Attention. We teach these skills and we teach far more. We actually teach all of those executive functions that we talked about, plus things like hand-eye coordination, social skills, because that is a skill that everyone here, majority of us here said, well, my child is fairly weak in that. Motor skills, spatial memory, mindfulness, and how to transfer and generalize all of this so that we can use them at school. All of this is what is taught in Play Attention, and we use them to strengthen executive function and cognitive skills through neurotechnology. This armband allows you to see your attention in real time and control the computer games, which teach those core skills. That's little fellow is wearing it right here. And there are a variety of games that we talked about. A strong executive function. This is exactly what we're talking about. By the way, there is the Cognitive Campout Summer Family Challenge. If you are interested in this, type in summer challenge, and we'll send you an email on it so that you can get in on the summer family challenge. 10 minutes a day to increase it. So just type it in and we'll send you an email, or if you want someone to call you, put in your phone number and we'll make certain they call you so that you can participate in the summer family challenge. The summer is an excellent time to teach these skills because, to be honest with you, we don't spend a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time, but the summer when they're out of school is the best time to get started to teach so that people can actually have your children can have a head start going into next year rather than being part of the summer brain drain, right? The summer slide, they're calling it now. So what you get, oh, by the way, this is something that's very cool that have put in this. and I just learned about this just a little while ago before the webinar. You get a free pre, mid, and post assessment so that they're tracking your improvement all the way through. And it's really good. That's if you're in the summer challenge. You get upgraded family user license, so you get more for larger families so that more than one person can use it at home. Maybe dad needs it as well. Sometimes we pass it on genetically as dads. Personalized curriculum for everyone who uses it. Access to the entire masterclass suite, which means you get a variety, every game we have. A family planning meeting with your focus coach. You get onboarding session, weekly fun family focus activities, access to supplemental training videos. That's all in the summer challenge. So again, if you would like that, just type in summer challenge and I'll get back to you. Here's the summary of the key points that we learned today. Your school's categorization of your child fundamentally sets a trajectory of which you have been in. It's like being blasted into a funnel. And remember that the lack of structure, right? The structural divide between the school and home and then the doctor is so big that there are things that are not accounted for, especially executive function. There is a major difference between achievement and performance. Performance will be short-term math tests, things like that. Achievement means social, academic, behavioral skills that have been learned over a long period of time. Remember, at the end of the year, we have an achievement test. Then we also found out today that 90% of ADHD kids have weak executive function. Medication serves a role, but teaches nothing. Medication works for neurotypical and ADHD the same way. Long-term outcomes on medication alone are low. We must teach executive function to bridge this gap. What's missing? Executive function training is missing. That multimodal approach is more successful and produces far greater results. And that's just not me talking. That's the National Institutes of Health saying that. I hope you have come away with some really good solutions, some fun things to have learned today. I really appreciate you being here. Next steps, if you'd like, you can take our online ADHD test, which will tell us where your child needs the most work. It's free, so you can take that. Just type in ADHD test or test, and they'll send you a link. You can also, if you want to talk about getting a consultation, you can type in consultation. If you hit summer challenge, you'll end up with a consultation sooner or later. Next, pay attention webinar, May 23rd, Empowering Women with ADHD. And many people here, many of the women who have attended today may feel like they have it as well. Might be a good thing for you to attend. And then special starting Mother's Day, sign up for the Cognitive Campout Summer Family Challenge. This is something that you'll really enjoy. It's a very good program they've got. Thank you, everyone. It has been wonderful being here with you. I really appreciate your time. If you have any further questions, just type them in. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit. So make certain you type test, type consultation, type in webinar, or challenge, right? Camp out, something like that, and you'll get information on all of that. I'll leave this up, even though I'm going to sign off, but I'll leave this up for a little bit for all those people who want to still type in their requests. And again, thank you so much. My name is Peter Freer, the founder and CEO of Play Attention. It's been a joy. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.